So perhaps you work in an industry where you may have heard the term 4/5 or a deferred salary leave. Today we are talking with HR professional John Cuddie all about how do you make that happen. John has the HR background as well as lived experiences, having taken two of his very own deferred salary leaves or 4/5s. So if this is something that is of interest to you, please take a listen. Welcome to the Gap Year podcast, where we explore the who, what, where, when, and why of gap years. It's real people sharing their stories, ideas, and experts diving deep into how you can make the right decisions in order to have a meaningful gap year. This is the place to be no matter where you are on your gap year journey. I'm Michelle Dittmer, your resident gap year expert. Let's jump right in. Everybody, and welcome to the Gap Year podcast. I am your host and Gap Year expert, Michelle Dittmer, and I am super excited to talk with the one and only John Cuddie today. We're going to be talking everything about deferred salary leaves and what that looks like and what he did on his. There's so much great conversation to come. So, John, thank you so much for joining on the podcast today.
Oh, thanks, Michelle. My pleasure.
So why don't you actually give us a little bit of background on who you are and why you're an expert in this topic, and then we'll kind of jump into the conversation from there.
Okay, thanks. So I spent over 30 years of my human resources career working for three different school boards. And I retired in 2018, and then I started working for the next 7 years as an employment advisor, helping basically new immigrants with their job search. I've since that job ended last year, and I still work with youth on employment issues. But going back to the school board experience, deferred salary leave plans are very popular in school boards. And part of my job for many years was approving these leaves for teachers and principals. And so at some point I decided I want to try this. And so that I did have an opportunity actually twice to do it. So.
Amazing. So you bring all of the HR knowledge and the lived experience to this conversation, which is a double whammy because now you not only do you understand it from the technical and the policy side of things, but you actually have reaped the benefits of participating in something like this, and doing it twice means that it was obviously worthwhile the first time for sure.
Yeah.
So you chose to do it two times. What was the motivation behind that, and what did you get up to while you were taking this time?
Okay, well, they were quite different the two times. So in 2007-8 school year, my kids were 13, 15, and 17. And so that was, again, normally in school boards, you take kind of a school year off. So I was off from September of 2007 till August 31st of 2008. And for the first leave, I did a lot of I will say kind of mundane things in the fall. I did some painting, some purging, some tidying, some visiting, things like that. And
You
we
say
did
they're
do.
mundane, but these are the things that we all wish we had more time to do.
Oh, exactly. Yeah,
Right?
there
It
was
doesn't
there was
have to be like blow your mind a trip to the moon. Like these are all things that are on our to-do lists and things that bring us joy and fulfillment, but the workday just takes up too many hours. So
Oh,
I would
exactly.
retract that mundane and say very important and fulfilling things.
Very good. Yes, it was very fulfilling. But there was, that cupboard that you've been trying to sort through, or that, we put a window in and it hadn't got painted around it. And I did those kinds of things. And we did do not a trip to the moon, but in December of that year, we did a family trip to India and Dubai. And so that was a bit of an adventure as well. In the sort of the January to June time frame, it got a bit more fun maybe. My daughter was in first year university, and for reading week, we went to Broadway for 4 days, her first time, and saw some shows and did some things in New York. And then in March, for March break for my two sons, we did a little ski holiday. But both of the certainly the September to December part of it and the January to August were great things. And it was really nice to have you're always busy and always doing things. And I mean, I find that even in retirement, you often hear people say, "How did I have time to work?" But having that year off and really doing some things was great. And that kind of led me into, I should maybe try this again. And so I originally thought I would do it in the 2013-14 school year. By then, my kids were 20, 22, 25, I guess. And so I was kind of gearing up for that. Didn't have any specific plans, but then a number of things happened within our school board. The director was retiring, my boss was retiring. There was a number of things sort of organizationally going on, and they asked me if I would defer my leave from September of 2013 and take January 2014 off like to December, which kind of spanned two school years. And I thought, I mean, I didn't have any specific plans, and I thought, sure, I'll do this. And it kind of made sense. And so again, in that time frame, I did again some things that you've wanted to do but never have time to do. But I'm also a great believer in some respects, and things happen for a reason. And so also during 2014, one of my closest friends was undergoing cancer treatment, and had stem cell and all kinds of stuff. And he lived about an hour away, and I was able to spend some really great time with him because I wasn't working. And so that was kind of unexpected time to do in my year off. I did do some fun things. We had some trips and things, but spending time with a close friend going through a difficult time was really important.
What a blessing. What a blessing to be able to be there for someone like that, and very serendipitous.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
What did this time off do for you personally and in your career? Like I can see your whole face comes alive when you talk about all of the things that happen, but so many people today are feeling burnt out, feeling exhausted. I dare I say hopeless in some frames. What could this intentional pause do for someone, or what did it do for you in terms of looking at your career as a whole span and maybe rejuvenating or feeling better about going back to work?
Yeah, good question. It's interesting. I mean, I've never been on maternity leave before, and actually, when my kids were born, there wasn't a parental leave too either. So I've never kind of been away from the workforce like I was for the year, and so that was, I would say it's kind of invigorating as well, but it was interesting. It was almost in human resources. I said it was kind of like a soap opera that you hadn't watched for a year, but you could kind of pick up the story when you got back, in some of this, some of the things that you were still working on or project, etc. So from a career point of view, I think it does kind of invigorate you. It also kind of humbles you in the sense that even though you, as I was, kind of a one-off position, you're not irreplaceable.
Mhm.
And life goes on. And certainly as I prepared for retirement, I didn't kind of fear about not, having anything to do because I mean, I did some personal things, but I also did some volunteer things, etc. And so, planning to having some time off, which again in retirement is much longer time, but that kind of part of not focusing all your everything in your work life, I think provided a bit of balance as well for me.
Yeah, I really appreciate that because I think a lot of us place a lot of value and our identity lies in our career and the work that we do. Not only does it fill up our time, but it gives us purpose and it gives us a sense of accomplishment and being able to balance that with recognizing that there's other ways that we can contribute and other ways that we can value ourselves, I think can be a really good reframe so that we make time for things even when we return back to work. Hey, it is important that I clean that cupboard. It is important that I find a volunteer placement and make time and space for things other than my job.
Yes, yeah, I agree.
Amazing. Okay, so we've talked about these amazing experiences you've had, and we know that it's common in the school board, but what the heck is a deferred salary leave? Let's get into the nuts and bolts of this because for people who may not be aware, so what is it and who might have access to a program like this?
Okay, a deferred salary leave plan is a leave of absence that really someone else helps you save for. And so it's very structured. And so many of us might have, I'm going to save $50 a month towards my vacation that I want to do next year. And, there might be a month where the car breaks down and you're so, okay, I can't put $50 in my, special vacation account because the car broke down. But a deferred salary leave plan, your savings come off your pay, whether it be every 2 weeks or every month, and go into a separate account. And so, how it works from sort of the math point of view, I did a 4/5. So, for 4 years, I'm saving for year five when I'm off. And so, how that works is in the 4 years, you get 80% of your gross pay and 20% of it goes into a trust account. And again, you can't say, don't take it off this pay or not, whatever. It's automatically coming off. And so it forces you to save. And so that 20% comes off every pay and goes into a trust account. And so you're living on 80% of your salary for 4 years. In year five, that 20% that you've been saving for 4 years is now another 80% plus some interest. But with interest rates pretty low, you're not going to have a huge windfall. So it's basically for 5 years, you're living on 80% of your salary. Now, I had a pension plan, which I was very fortunate to have. During the 4 years that I was saving towards this, although I was getting 80% of my pay, 100% of my pension contributions were coming off. So
Hmm.
I so I was earning full pension benefits for those 4 years. In year five, it's like a leave without pay that you're drawing money from. So you don't pay pension contributions for year five. And in my case as well, most places, your benefits are not paid for in year five. So
Right.
you got to look at some sort of budgeting things as well. You do obviously continue to pay employment insurance and CPP, et cetera. But so for 4 years, you're earning 80% of your salary. Year five, you're living on 80% plus interest. And so there's a bit of budgeting that has to go on. You ask a little bit about two positions that this occurs in. It's very common in school boards. I don't sort of know the history of that. I was trying to do a little research, but it seems to have been there like for the whole 30 years that I worked there, and I don't know when it eventually happened. Um, I've noticed it as well in some universities. Now, I'm not talking about a sabbatical with a professor. These are staff positions where you could again work for 4 years and have the fifth year off. I've noticed it well in some municipal governments and some provincial governments as well will have different plans. And I've seen them 4/5, 3/4. That one's 75%. It happens quickly, but you're living on 75% for 3 years. And then year four, um, in our school board, with the teachers, we had also 2.4/3.
Oh,
So an
wow.
elementary teacher could work 2 years, Then the next third year would work from September to December and have December to June off. And
Mm,
for a secondary teacher, there was a 2.5 over 3 where they could have semester 2 off. So a bunch of different options, and different employers may have different ones. But the key is learning to live, on a reduced salary. And contractually, you do sign a contract because the money is placed in trust. And so if something happens to you, you have to designate a beneficiary, and you also have to promise or sign that you're going to come back for at least as long as your year was, at least as long as your leave was. So if you did a 4/5 and were off a year, you have to guarantee to your employer you're coming back for that year, because otherwise it can become a tax avoidance instead of a tax deferral thing program. So
definitely. And I think it's really important that people know that your job is still there for you. You're not
yes.
quitting. You're not getting a severance package for a year. Your spot is guaranteed. So similar to a maternity or parental leave, that you have that spot still reserved for you when you step back into it. And I think it's really important to note that as folks are as family dynamics are shifting, not everybody is having children these days, and this is a way to have those. I'm going to use breaks here. I've had 2 kids, so it's not really a break when you go on maternity leave, but having those pauses in career, this is a way that you can build it into your career plan to have those pauses, even if children are not part of your life plan as well. So just good to know, and kind of tuck it into your back pocket as well. I've also heard that some law firms are starting to put this into place for some of their lawyers, and some tech companies as well are looking at something similar. I think a lot of those high stress industries where they are seeing burnout, or they're looking for alternative solutions on how do we support the mental health and well-being of our staff, and can we incentivize being able to have that recharge time, which I think is really interesting.
No, that's great to hear that other employers are looking at it as well. And from a staffing point of view, if I can just add into
Yeah.
that, um, for some, like in my second deferred salary leave, I was a little more intentional on who replaced me, because I had someone that reported to me that I felt had managerial potential, but here was an opportunity for her to try the job for a year. And certainly we had a few more conversations when she started in my role, and sort of like, how did you do this kind of thing? But it was great experience for her to see if this was a career or path that she wanted to pursue, to sort of try it for a year or try it for 6 months. So yeah, so when you talk about tech companies and law firms and things like that, it's a great to give other people an opportunity to see if this is an area perhaps of law that they're interested in, or is their dream really to be that partner that they
Yeah.
that they thought, or the head programmer or whatever. So it's a great opportunity. Certainly from the teaching point of view and the staffing, I will say it's a little easier because school sort of starts in September, ends in June, and it's kind of like, the end of the financial year, and then it all starts over again in September with new teachers. Some have retired, some have moved to school, some have changed grades, etc. And so, from a staffing point of view, if the grade 3 teacher goes on leave, another person just comes in to do that, and you might have 3 grade 3 teachers and one goes away, and now you have 2 of the original, and a new person that's there for the year who's maybe trying grade 3 for a change. So in some respects where you've got sort of a volume of positions, it can be a little easier from staffing, as opposed to mine, which was a one-off manager, and I was the only manager that has ever done it and has ever applied, and I think has ever done it too. So,
Yeah. Well, and I think from succession planning too, when you're trying to give people opportunities and allow them to step into other roles, it gives the senior person the break. It gives their replacement an opportunity to test things out, and then even the seniors to be able to see what potential that person might have in that role without committing to bringing them on in a full-time, long-term position. So I think it can be a great tool that way for sure. But you mentioned you're the only one that had ever done it in that role. What do you think holds people back from taking advantage of something like this?
I think the main thing, I mean, even the economy is much different than maybe it was or wasn't. I don't know, but there, I think it's sort of finance plays a big part of it. Um, I mean, I remember when I was applying, they're like, "Oh, you've got kids going to university. Like, how are you going to manage on 80% of your salary?" And so, I mean, you do have to do a little budgeting and some thinking, but I think part of it is the finance piece. I mean, there are some costs, like when I'm on my year's leave of absence, I do have to pay for my benefits if I wish to consider them or continue them. When I finished my leave, I had to decide if I was going to buy my pension back or not. And people probably have I know people have similar discussions when they're on maternity and parental leave about, buying pension if they take an extended leave, etc. So there's finance piece. And often, the other thing, if you're doing a 4/5, I mean, 5 years out is a long time. And so life changes. And I mean, over the years, I had, several teachers, I will say many probably, who's, suddenly discovered they were pregnant or their marriage fell apart or they had some other life issue come up. And so they had to cancel their leave. And the leaves do allow for that. But it's easier if you're in year 1 or 2. But if you're like near the end of year 4 and you've saved all this money and then you have to cancel, that's hard too. But I think primarily it's probably the finance piece that holds people back in both the teaching and I will say in the support staff side. It's interesting. Because so many of our staff, even secretaries, managers, educational assistants, like they all have this provision. But as I said, I'm the only one that I can think of that did it. And I don't know why, because it's a great, I mean, I did it twice. So I
Yeah.
think it's a great plan, but I think it's probably a bit of the finance and maybe sort of that looking out into the future, what could happen.
Yeah, well, we know the world is very turbulent and ever changing these days. So, like you said, 5 years, there's lots that can happen personally or in the world around us. There's lots of things that are going on, but to be able to take advantage of something like this could be a dream come true. But you do have to plan for it. So you kind of touched on the budgeting side of things. Are there other things that people should take into consideration as they're planning for a 4/5 or a deferred salary leave? Is there other things that they should be considering by being strategic and planning for?
Um, as I said, there's obviously the budgeting. I think the staffing piece, I learned a lot from my first leave. I kind of left that more up to my boss to kind of do the staffing piece behind. And it ended up like there ended up being two different people in my job, just with a couple circumstances. So I was much more, I will say, strategic when I decided I was going to do this leave. And as we got closer, I made sure that the person that I wanted to do my job. And so I was able to kind of mentor and train them a little bit before I left. So the staffing piece, I think, is important. Um, there's obviously some family things to think about as well. If you have a spouse or partner that's working and you're taking a year off or 6 months off, It's probably similar to, I guess, if one spouse is working, the other retires, and then there's that kind of thing of when are you going to retire? Or maybe they like the other person working and they're retired. But so there's some family things I think to think about. And I guess the other thing would be don't get too caught up, like don't have a giant to-do list of,
Mhm.
I'm gonna, paint the house, put in new windows and do the roof. Like have a bit of fun too. So, um, balance it between perhaps some things that you would like to do, maybe it be travel or whatever, but also some things that you might like to get to in terms of, as we talked about, the closet cleaning and the purging and or spending time with your aging parents or other friends. So that would be a few of the things I think are important to think about.
I love that. And it dovetails so nicely into how we work with young people when they're planning their gap time as well. We tell them we want them to set goals in four different categories. The first one being personal. So, what are you going to do for yourself? How do you want to grow? What do you want to learn? What are the things that you need to do for you? So, what are people going to notice a year from now? If you're sitting down for a beer or coffee, they're going to, oh, John, you're so much more relaxed. Okay. So relaxation is a goal, or you're so much happier, or you're so much more connected with your family. So, what are those personal things? So, that's the first category. The second category we suggest people look at is strategic. So, what are those things that future you is going to thank you for? So, like cleaning out those closets, getting that painting done. What are maybe you want to learn a new hobby. Maybe you want to take a course to upgrade your skills. So, what are those strategic pieces? The third one is social. How are you going to stay social? Because a lot of our community and our connection with other humans comes through school or comes through the workplace. So, how are you going to stay connected? Who do you need to meet? Who do you want to stay? Who do you want to reconnect with? And then the fourth one is just as important as all the other ones is those fun goals. What are those things you're going to do just for fun, just because you can, because there are not many times in your life when you are going to have the opportunity to have this level of freedom with your day-to-day timetable and activities that you want to do. So all those things that you mentioned fall into those exact four categories. So we are totally on the same page.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to frame that, Michelle, just in terms of the goals and things. And it made me think of one thing in 2014 when I was off, I started volunteering at a community breakfast in East London once a month. And I still do that. Like I've now have my 12-year pin.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, so that was something I did on my year off, and I was able to keep doing that even when I was working. I would because I would go in at 6 to help set up the breakfast and stay till about 9 or 9:30, and then work a little later on the third Tuesday of the month. But that's something that I started then and still continued on. So that just made me reminded me of that when you were talking about what transpired during your leave that you still have with you. So
Yeah. Well, and it's not something that is so rigidly bookended by the start and end date of your leave. There is so much growth that happens and so much you learn about yourself and how you want to participate in the world and other opportunities that are before you that you just don't have time, space, capacity to explore. And then with that little bit of freedom, then you can be selective when those working hours get added back into your schedule. Well, what was really important to me during this time? What can I carry with me into this next chapter along with my continued work hours?
yeah, it's interesting too when you mention about the social thing. And of course, when I was doing my leaves, we were, 5 days a week in the office, and the work family was a big thing. But we definitely stayed connected, and I didn't ever feel sort of, not part of the group if I wanted to be, kind of thing. But it would be interesting now in terms of, with the sort of hybrid work, how that might differ again. So.
Yeah. And it's interesting because sometimes we have these big goals or these big ideas of we're going to go out for coffee, we're going to go out for a lunch, we're going to hang out with our friends. But if all our friends are still working 9 to 5, then you've got a whole day's worth of time that maybe you can't be as social as you thought you might want to be. So we also have to look at what's happening in our whole ecosystem and the other humans that are around as well.
I never felt lonely on my leaves, I must say. But
Okay, so I think we've convinced everybody to do a deferred salary leave now, based on this conversation. So if the listeners are saying, yes, this is something I want to explore, what is their first step? Who should they be talking to?
I would certainly talk to your boss or your employer first for some information of whether this is something that they might be interested in doing. And there may be employers that know nothing about it. And so you might bring them some information that I mean, you can get some information through CRA, Canada Revenue Agency, just about some of the tax implications, how they work. You can even, Google deferred salary leave plan just so you can kind of explain, okay, I work for 4 years, I save whatever. And so I would suggest you start that conversation with your employer, maybe your payroll person as well. And but be ready for some questions maybe about staffing or whatever. But that would be my suggestion for beginning the conversation.
Amazing. Well, John, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. It's been a delight and so informative for all of our listeners out there. So thanks again for joining us on the podcast.
Thanks, Michelle. It was great chatting with you and kind of reliving my deferred salary leaves too as well. So, but I wish everybody well and thanks for having me.
Amazing. And to all our listeners, keep on adventuring.